President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Good evening, and welcome to Today in History. I'm Matt Datillo. Today is March 14th, 2010, and this is episode 429. Well, I'm joined tonight by Jenny, who those of you who follow me on Facebook probably know as Evil Cat. She's sitting on the desk looking out the window, but you never know where that's going to lead. Tonight's show was originally written by me for the podcast in March 2006. Since the shows from this period are only available on DVD, I thought re-recording this episode might bring it to a new audience for the first time. It is also one of my favorite stories, albeit an ultimately sad one. I'm still working on the second half of the Admiral Kimmel episode from late February. Once again, I found myself delving into the details of the story. This is one of the many times I have wished that this show was perhaps an hour long. However, that would take a full-time commitment by me, something life simply doesn't allow right now. I apologize for the delay. If you're interested in receiving a DVD of past shows, like the one you're about to hear, please stay tuned at the end of the podcast for details on purchasing one. Today in 1932, George Eastman died at the age of 77. His name is the Eastman in Eastman Kodak, the company that more than any other in the world brought photography to the masses during the last decades of the 19th century. Eastman's story is one of poor boy made good, hard work rewarded, with wealth and selflessness rewarded with immortality. George Eastman was born in 1854 in Waterville, New York. His father ran a nursery business on the family land, but sold it when George was 5 in order to start his own school, the Eastman Commercial College. The senior Eastman died when George was only 14, leaving the young man as the only breadwinner for his mother and 2 sisters. He dropped out of school, never to return. Eastman got his start as a messenger boy for a local insurance company, and eventually ended up writing policies. Still not making enough money, he studied accounting at night, and 5 years later was hired at a Rochester bank as a clerk. His hard work was paying dividends, but the real fruits of his labor were yet to come. When Eastman was 24, he purchased the equipment necessary to take photographs and planned a vacation to Santo Domingo. He never made the trip, but he fell in love with photography. The problem with his new hobby was the weight and bulk of the equipment. It was no exaggeration to say that a pack mule was needed to carry everything a traveling photographer needed in the late 1870s. Eastman read of advances being made in England with dry plates, which led him to start his own business preparing dry plates for sale to photographers in bulk. It was during this time, in the early 1880s, that Eastman began to focus on the task of making photography available to the masses. He invented roll film, which replaced the rigid plate with a roll of cellulose-like material. It was easier and lighter to transport and made it possible to make cameras smaller than they had ever been. The race was on to make, in his words, the camera as convenient as the pencil. And so the Kodak camera was born in 1888. The word Kodak had no meaning other than as a brand name. Eastman liked the letter K, so he made up a word that started and ended with the letter. He also came up with the first slogan for the product: "You press the button, we do the rest," since early Kodaks were sent back to the factory for the film to be developed and the camera to be reloaded. Eastman became famous for the generosity he showed both his employees and the world. He set up a wage dividend in his factories, which was a bonus paid to each employee yearly based on the company's financial gains that year. In 1919, he gave 1/3 of his holdings in the company to his employees. During his lifetime, it is estimated that Eastman gave away more than $100 million. He gave $20 million of that to MIT under the name Mr. Smith. It took years to find out who Mr. Smith really was. Eastman gave the money to the school, because he had hired some young men from MIT and felt that they were his best assistants. During the last 2 years of his life, Eastman was in great pain from spinal stenosis, although that diagnosis was unknown in the 1930s. Knowing that he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair and refusing to do so, he ended his own life on March 14, 1932, by firing a single bullet into his chest. The note he left behind simply said, "My work is done. Why wait?" Well, that's it for the history this evening. If you'd like to get in touch with me, please feel free to do so. My email address is mattstodayinhistory@gmail.com. You'll find a transcript of this and previous episodes of this podcast at mattstodayinhistory.com, along with a donation link, which serves two purposes. First, if you'd like to make a donation, which is always, of course, appreciated. Second, if you're ordering the aforementioned DVD of past episodes, the cost for those is $20 in the lower 48 United States and $25 everywhere else. You'll find me on Facebook. Just do a search for Matt Dattilo, MattDattilo. Thank you very much for staying subscribed, and have a good evening. We'll talk again soon.